What is up, fellas? This is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me for this time. Today, I'm going to be responding to a question that someone wrote in and asked, and his question was just so good, I can't help myself. I have to respond to this one. It was a three-part question. He asked first, what is a man? And he did throw the quotes in there, which was very telling. Number two, he asked, when do you become a man? And I thought this question was very good. I think it's a question that a lot of men think but never ask, so don't find an answer to. So I'm going to do my best to answer that as well. And then number three, is there steps to the process into manhood? Now, all three of these questions, I'm going to tie them together into one answer. I'm hoping in a very compact period of time. So let's begin way back. Let's step back and look at two words that I define very differently: masculinity and manhood. Now, masculinity for me, in my understanding, is a cultural construct. It's an understanding of men that comes from the culture itself. And if you go to men to understand manhood or masculinity, you're going to get a bunch of woke and broke ideas. Everybody's going to have a different answer. In fact, some people are going to make up their own answers, which is exactly what's happening within the culture today. It's probably the reason this gentleman asked this question. Second, you can go to the Bible and discover manhood. That's what I do, and here's why I do it. Because if you want to understand something that's created, you go back to the creator of that thing to understand the created thing, don't you? That's simple logic. So I understand that God created the very first man. In fact, he created him in his image, and he made him very good. I mean, God stood back and said, man, that's good. Hopefully you see the pun there. Anyway, in chapter 3 of the narrative, we blow the whole thing up. We decide we're going to try our hand with cultural masculinity. We're going to live the way that we want. We want to be God, so we're going to act the way that we want, and we blow our relationship with God. We call that sin. Sin entered and separated us in a relationship from God. Manhood was destroyed. Then the rest of the narrative of the Old Testament talks about how bad this sin has affected us as men. We see it in story after story after story after story. There's a search, and it's a search for one man who will stand in the gap for the land, that God might not destroy it, yet he found none. But there's good news, and the good news begins with the New Testament, because there God inserts his own man into the story. The perfect man, his son, Jesus Christ. Because I think God gets mildly irritated with us, by the way. Anyway, Jesus walks with us and talks with us, and we see perfect manhood. We touch perfect manhood. We see the effect of perfect man. But at the end of his life, he does something remarkable. He dies on a cross, not as a victim, as a savior for all mankind, as a propitiation for our sin, all sin that began way back with the first man. He dies on the cross for us, reconciling the broken state of our manhood so that he can reinstate us as men in a relationship with God, remaking us as men that we destroyed back in Genesis chapter 3. Now get this, Jesus doesn't just die. He goes to the grave and he gets up again. He gets up, defeating sin and death, evidenced by his life, walking around and among us again. He proves that he has power over all sin. And then we discover how we can become men. Ephesians 2, verse 8. For by grace, by God's grace, you have been saved through faith. So the means of us becoming men is faith in the one who was the man when we couldn't be the man, so that we could be remade into men and become men of God. So, brother, I think I've answered all your questions. God makes men in his image, and that's the definition of a man. When do you become a man? You become a man by faith through his grace in what Jesus did for you. And there's no steps in the process, because Jesus did all the work for you. All it requires of you is faith to believe that Jesus Christ was the man and you are not, and you can become a man of God. No cultural rite of passage would ever accomplish that. We needed a divine Savior to save us from our sin. So guess what? That means that sitting right there, right now, that you can become a man for the very first time, a man of God, adopted into his family as an heir and a son. How about that? That's good news, fellas. Well, I hope this has blessed you today. Hope the answer is adequate. If it is, share it with someone else, and I'll see you right back here again